Now, you remember there are two different kinds of functions, two basic buckets that most functions fall into. They are the return something functions or the do something functions. So return something functions require us to send a value back to Python that the user or the coder then can use somewhere else in the program. A function can be both, but it has to be one or the other or both. So I can have it do something, return something, or both. Now, this one that we just did was a do something. It didn't return anything. It just prints stuff out. There's nothing sent back to Python there. So returning values in a function sort of looks like this. So the function is a black box. I did this on purpose. I used the shape because I want you to remember this. A good function just does what it does. The people who use the function, whether it's you or maybe you're writing a function that can be used by other people, which you can do. That's what a module is, essentially. A function that can be used by other people. All they should have to know is what goes in the function and what comes out of it. How it works shouldn't matter. Okay, if it's a well-designed function, all that matters is what goes in and what comes out, or what it does on the other end. But the return values in a function work like this. It's easy to remember because you use the return keyword. Okay, so if I have a function called doAddition, and it takes two arguments, it has two parameters, int number one and int number two, it takes those and adds them together, puts them into a variable called int answer, and then returns that variable. The way I would use that function or call that function in practice is I would call it here, but I have to do something with it because it's a return function. It doesn't print anything out by itself. So let's play around with that for a second so we can make sure we are all following it. Copy. Okay, so there we go. And if I run that, it does the addition between 2 and 3, and it spits out 5. That's correct. But notice, if I was to just say do addition 3 and 3, it runs with no errors, but it doesn't do anything because this is a return function, not a do something function. Could I have it printed out here? Yes, I could. But that's not always what you want. Sometimes you just want it to return something because you're going to do something else with that data or that number. So if I do this, I have to have something to catch the answer, a bucket to put it in, or I have to do something with it immediately. I could just nest it inside the print function because then it catches the answer and prints it out immediately. But that's not always what I want to do because sometimes I want to get that number and put it into a variable or get the result of that function, put it into a variable so I can do something else with it. Because I might have another one where I say int n1, and I'm just going to say int answer equals int n1 times 5, and I could return it here. I could do that, or I could make that a do something function and just print it out. So let's say I want to do the addition and then feed that to times 5. So I go times 5, int number, and then I might do this. Okay, so 2 plus 3 times 5 is 25. Okay, now, who could answer me this by looking at the code? Why does it say none here? Look carefully. I'll give you a hint. Look at this function and how I've called it here. What am I doing on line 10? Somebody tell me what I'm doing on line 10. I am calling the function with the addition of 2 and 3. So this will put 5 in here. I'm calling times 5 with that. So 5 gets put into this parameter as an argument. And then it goes here, multiplies it times 5, int answer, and then it prints it out. But what am I doing here? Here, I am assigning the return from this function to a variable. What does this function return? Nothing. Look at it carefully. The last line of that function is line 7, where I just print something out. This function doesn't return anything. So when I do this, it just puts an emptiness. It puts nothing in here. So when I print it out, it says none because it's empty. If I want it to return something, I can do that. And now when I run it, it prints 25 twice, which is redundant, but that's what makes a difference. One more thing about the return keyword is that it will stop executing code in this block, in this function, as soon as it hits return. So, in other words, if I do this, notice that it highlights it. It doesn't underline it in red. It won't produce an error. But it also is never going to print anything here. Because as soon as it gets to here, it's done. Okay, so now it'll only print 25 one time, which is this line down here, causing it to print. So that is a basic look at how to use return values.